Our storm watch coverage continues. I'm Sheryl Plouffe. Glad you're here. We have freezing rain warnings in place for Hamilton up toward Oakville, Burlington included, but excluding the city of Toronto proper and Milton and Kitchener-Waterloo. 5 to 10 centimeters of snow. It has already reached the GTA, so we're talking about poor driving conditions for the drive home later today. Of course, we're all over this with our storm watch coverage. But right now, we want to talk spring outlook. Here's Chris St. Clair and Chris Scott right now. I'm Sheryl Plouffe. Glad you're here for an update because our storm watch coverage continues. A pretty impactful storm that's making its way across southern Ontario. And Environment Canada has issued freezing rain fall warnings for these areas down into the Niagara area and even portions of the 401. But it's more so from Kitchener-Waterloo and southwest that there's the greater potential for some freezing rain. So these are the types that we can expect. We're talking snowfall in Ottawa, Montreal, Eastern Ontario, and even for Toronto proper, snowfall. But once you move west of Toronto, that's where it starts to get dicey with that freezing rain potential. That's what it looks like through the afternoon. For the drive home, yeah, it's going to be a bit of a mess here down through the QEW, portions of the 401. But notice that change over to rain just with regard to how much snow. It's a sizable amount, 5 to 10 centimeters of snow expected. But as mentioned, there is potential for some freezing rain. With more details on what freezing rain is and how it develops, here's meteorologist Jacqueline Whittall. Parents pulling their kids out of school to go and play in the hail and to take it in because it's just such an unusual event. What is going on with our weather? Well, we have a couple of things happening. Our low pressure system right now is coming through and it is bringing snowfall, possibility of freezing rain, messy conditions for the drive home. And then we see all of that moving off into eastern Canada. Now, there is the potential on Saturday of a little bit more in the way of weather as we get up from -7 Friday to 0 with the light flurries. And then, so we're not looking at much in terms of accumulation with this, but we have to watch it. And then back to -1, but staying near that freezing mark. So that's a good sign, right? Now that we're in the month of March, we'd like to see the temperatures just start to go up a little bit. From our storm watch coverage continues, and there is going to be a high impact storm across southern Ontario today because of the amount of snow. But in addition to that, freezing rain may be playing a part in all of this. So we do have freezing rain warnings in place. That includes Oakville, Burlington, but excludes the city of Toronto. Now, due to the proximity to the areas that are actually warned officially, I wouldn't rule out the potential for freezing rain, but it may be just below the criteria necessary down into the Niagara area, even some ice pellets. So the temperatures at the surface are still cold enough to support snowfall. This all has more to do with the temperature at different levels of the atmosphere. And that's why we see different types of precipitation. This is what it looks like from a snapshot standpoint through the afternoon. That freezing line does move up a little bit, getting awfully close to Toronto. Now keep in mind the evening. This is when a lot of people are heading home, maybe late from the office. You've got to get home, and we're talking about some very poor driving weather in the GTA and down through Hamilton as well. Other than that, it's snowfall north of that. So driving from Toronto to Barrie, you're really running in mostly to snowfall with this. And there could even be a brief spell of some rainfall along the north side of Lake Erie, so south of the 401. Now, looking into the pre-dawn hours of Wednesday, snowfall up toward Barrie, colder temperatures, and then we see the clearing beginning and as all the wet weather moves away from us. But we're concerned about the amount of snowfall, 5 to 10 centimeters of snow. Ottawa, Montreal, a snow event for you, but back into Toronto, Hamilton, and the parents were taking their kids out of school to say, let's go down and play because it's such a rare event there. Wish we could say the same for us, right? That winter weather was a rare event. But mind you, that's hail. And, we're going to be into that spring season before we know it. In fact, we have already released describing how it is we came with the outlook in the first place. That's really what's happening at 9 p.m. So you'll want to tune in for that. When we look at our precipitation Wednesday, it's moving off into the Atlantic. That's just light snow, really about 5 centimeters headed toward the Maritimes. And then we have high pressure in place here. We'll watch this low to the north on Saturday. We see the temperature staying cold right about in here. Look at the wind chills still in the minus mid-teens. And then we start to moderate a little bit. Is this the beginning of a trend of warmer air? Well, there's some indication when we look at our patterns for next week and late next week that we could be seeing some milder air trying to push into Ontario. Our storm watch coverage continues here on the Weather Network. I'm Sheryl Plouffe. We have a pretty decent low pressure system that's bringing snow to us across southern Ontario. But with the pinks here, that's where the freezing rain and ice pellets are happening right at this moment. And then some rainfall further down into Indiana. We're looking actually at some snowfall rates here, fairly significant across southern Ontario. And even here where it's darker blues, we can see some bands, maybe of some heavier snow, or perhaps that's just a little bit of bright banding there as that transition. The radars are detecting it because of the reflectivity. But nevertheless, it's some high snow rates at times across the GTA. Through the afternoon, Ottawa and Montreal expected to be just a snow event there. But for us, that's when it starts to creep up. So the travel here on the 401 could be very icy with freezing rain potential. Let's turn it over to meteorologist Jacqueline Woodall right now with an explanation of how freezing rain forms. Thanks, Jacqueline. Well, the snowfall, or the precipitation, I should say, across Atlantic Canada is expected to stay as snowfall. So we're looking at 5 to 10 centimeters generally for mainland Nova Scotia, southern New Brunswick, in fact, or temperatures. We have nice mild air at the coast. Vancouver and Victoria sitting at 8 with sunshine. A little bit cooler in the interior valleys, but we'll take it. Still have some cold in place in Alberta, and that will be the case today. And likely tomorrow we start to turn the corner and bring the temperatures up thereafter. So Thursday and Friday look to be mild, talking double digits. Spring-like weather on the way for some portions of the west. We'll have to watch this low, though, as it does have the potential to bring us some precipitation. But largely, as we look ahead to Wednesday, the storm is for the east. Our storm watch coverage continues. This is a look from just a short time ago outside of our Oakville studios. It shows you the snow coming down, starting to accumulate, and some freezing rain warnings are posted across southern Ontario. And it may not necessarily be the case in Toronto, but Oakville is included in the freezing rain warning down toward Hamilton. So likely some icy driving here for the QEW now and a little bit later on, now because of the snow, but later because of the potential for the ice pellets and freezing rain. And that extends down into southwestern Ontario. Snow with this system as it rolls through. Just heard from a friend of mine on Facebook from the Cambridge area saying that the roads are already getting bad. And that's where we find Kelly Noseworthy. Thank you very much, Kelly. It's a concern on the Grand River and some other tributaries and rivers, too, with the amount of snow that's on the ground for some. But tomorrow, weather-wise, it is still going to be a bit windy. It's colder for certain, but at least the system will have cleared by that time. In fact, as we look toward this afternoon and eastern Canada, our departing low pressure system here, still some strong winds for eastern Newfoundland. But here comes the next low. It does bring snowfall, yes. We're talking 5 to 10 centimeters of snow, but it also helps to moderate the temperatures across the Maritimes because it's cold right now. But we're talking, again, southern New Brunswick, mainland Nova Scotia, parts of Newfoundland. There are many warnings in place across the east. They span from winter storm to blowing snow and wind warnings, extreme cold back up here into Quebec. Chills this afternoon in the minus mid-20s, minus 30s further north. Calgary, on the other hand, it is a colder day. That's when the temperatures will start to rise. So 2 more days and we can make it through. The forecast this afternoon is, again, we're looking at temperatures still cold. Edmonton at minus 11 with sun, but Vancouver and Victoria sitting at 8 degrees under sunny skies and high pressure, looking nice there. So it's really very calm and dry in the west with that ridge. Now, what's happening for eastern Canada is our storm moves off into the Atlantic provinces, as mentioned, but then we have this other low. This is expected to stay south of us, though, but the cold conditions persist over the Great Lakes Basin, and off goes that low pressure system. At this point, it looks to be offshore of Nova Scotia, but we'll keep tabs on it. Chilly conditions persist in the Great Lakes and seasonal in the west. In Oakville right now. So yes, the weather makeover has brought us some snowfall. And the low pressure system in question is this one right here. So it's moving through southern Ontario. We've got some snow to the north as well. But in terms of active weather across our country, we have our departing low in Newfoundland, but really nothing going on. So let's focus on Ontario, where we have snowfall in Ottawa, Montreal, back into Toronto, in the city of Toronto, I should say, to make that distinction. Expected to stay as snow, but it doesn't take long before you move west of Toronto, and you're going to be running into, through the afternoon, maybe not so much, but that would be the case down toward Hamilton. So driving on the QEW here, possibly very icy, and then travel on the 401 into southwestern Ontario toward Woodstock, London looking at some icing too. Windsor, not as much expected in way of snow totals because there's going to likely be a changeover to some rain. So on Wednesday, we start to clear out. The low pressure system moves away, but we're left with some cold conditions and some snow toward Georgian Bay and Lake Huron. And the temperature's staying chilly for the time being. So the low will bring slightly higher totals to the south side of Newfoundland. St. John's in the range of 5 to 10. Same for Gander, back toward Halifax, Yarmouth. Yesterday, we did see a little bit of snow and some winds in Alberta, but that's all easing and moving out of the region. So now it's dry and calm. The winds have eased. We've got seasonal temperatures at the coast. The interior BC, a little bit on the chilly side. Still cold in Alberta, but by the time we get to Thursday, we start to change that around. For the time being, in the eastern prairies, lots of cold conditions here. Wind chills extreme in the -20s. Still cold in Alberta, not quite to that degree. 30s. So dry in the west, high pressure building in. That's why it's so cold in Manitoba overnight. Cold in northern Ontario. That storm moves off into Atlantic Canada. And then we have our next system that we've got to watch, although it stays offshore of Nova Scotia. Freezing rain warnings are in place across southwestern Ontario and into the Niagara area, as well as Hamilton, and even extending up toward Oakville, included in this. Now, is there potential to see some freezing rain, some ice pellets in Toronto, in Milton? Yes, absolutely, but we're not officially in the actual warning for that as that warm sector moves through. Largely snow, potential for ice pellets and mixing in there, which also helps to keep down the snow totals further to the southwest where we see the mixing. But it's a problem because we have icing conditions expected, and it can be a bit of a problem with so many people traveling across these regions. Now, when we talk about the amounts, 5 to 10 centimeters of snow, Montreal, Ottawa, even for Toronto, but down toward southwestern Ontario, again, it could change over to rain. That would keep our totals down. Now, let's talk with meteorologist Jacqueline Woodall right now about how we transition rain to snow. Here it is. Thanks so much, Jacqueline, for that explanation. Environment Canada has issued some, winter storm warnings, wind warnings, blowing snow across Newfoundland and portion of Cape Breton here in PEI, and also extreme cold up into Quebec and Labrador. But in Newfoundland, let's go to Gander, actually, check in on Gander. Ooh, that's a good wind in the interior of Newfoundland with our low pressure system as it's departing. That's why the winds are so strong. You could hear it there, howling at times, and that will ease as the low pressure system moves away. But the new ones coming into the Maritimes, it does have a warm sector, although it's so brief, we're not expecting Halifax to really change over to rain. It should stay as snow as it progresses off into Newfoundland. This will bring between 5 and 10 centimeters of snow tomorrow in the Maritimes, and subsequently St. John's, or rather Newfoundland. We'll have to wait another, say, day or so to see that. Back toward the west, it's dry. That arrow to change direction. You see a turnaround here. It'll be more from the south and west eventually by the time we get, I don't think it's on this movie, but on the next one, it does turn around on Wednesday, and that's more of a westerly push. That's when the temperatures will begin to rise. Right now, we've got wind chills in the -20s, still cold across the Great Lakes Basin, and blustery weather and an offshore low for Atlantic Canada by the end of the week.